When MRG recently conducted its blind spot research, one of the things we looked at was what were the behaviors where people demonstrated blind spots most commonly, right? And one of the things we looked at was what were the top 5 behaviors where blind spots were most common. Within that top 5, strategic was not in it. And that surprised some people. They thought that the behavior of strategic might be one of the ones that is more common in terms of blind spots. So let's start at the beginning, and then I'll just sort of talk through this really quickly. First of all, what is the behavior strategic in the LEA? Behavior strategic is really about how much frequency or priority a person is thinking about the impact of a decision. The way that I like to think about it is the higher a strategic score, the more analytical a person might be, the more objective they might be, and they really might be thinking through the impact of a decision, both in terms of time frame, but also in terms of where is this decision going? Who does it impact? It's me, it's my team, it's my department, it's the organization. And again, more priority or frequency on this behavior, usually that impact or thinking about that impact gets bigger. As the score comes down in strategic, both of those things kind of contract a little bit. So the first thing I want to say is just because the behavior of strategic wasn't in the top 5 in the research doesn't mean that people don't show blind spots in this behavior. In fact, when I went back and looked at the research, strategic was, I think, behavior number 8 or 9. So it's still in that top third of the behaviors on the LEA where blind spots might be most common. So I think it absolutely can happen. I think the other thing to think about with the behavior strategic, a little bit outside of thinking about it just from a blind spot point of view, is how it's a couple of things. First of all, is how internal the behavior of strategic may be, and then also the observer perception of the behavior. And what I mean by that is the difference between potentially what a boss thinks is strategic behavior versus what a direct report thinks strategic behavior is. Let's go back to what I said about the internal thing. A lot of strategic is about thought, right? There is an intellectual aspect to it. And so a lot of the strategic behavior is up here. And I think sometimes, yes, it is difficult for a person to make observable what their strategic thinking is. And I think very often people have to be quite intentional about it. Going back to this difference between the boss's perspective, direct report's perspective. And again, if I go back actually to the research, there often is a bigger gap in blind spots from the boss perspective than the direct report perspective. So very often the boss is not seeing the strategic behavior quite as much as the direct reports. And I think that's interesting because I think at some level for direct reports, they almost see their leader as strategic by default because they have more information, they just share it, they seem to know more. And that I think sometimes comes across as, yes, this individual is strategic or this leader is strategic. From the boss point of view, it's much more about a dialogue, right? Can we have a strategic conversation about the decision we should make or what direction we should go? And so I think it's interesting to think about, again, what is the leader doing with each of these observer groups? What is the leader doing and talking about with the boss versus what is the leader doing or talking about with the direct reports? And I'm not saying strategic conversations can't happen with direct reports, but I do think that sometimes they happen less. So I think it's interesting to just see and think about how the strategic behavior plays out by observer group. And again, thinking about the context or what the leader is trying to do with each of those observer groups.